Welcome to Trinity Wesleyan Church Online. We are so glad to have you here today. We've been praying for you, and we're excited for what God is going to be speaking to you today.
Already missing summer vacation? Just because summer is over, doesn't mean you can't keep dreaming of a salty sea. Put on your life jackets and set sail as we hear from Jesus' teachings. Sit back, relax, and set sail too. Seize the day.
When Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue leaders, named Jairus, came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him.
"My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her, so that she will be healed and live."
So Jesus went with him. A large crowd followed and pressed around him, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors, and had spent all she had. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought,
"If I just touch his clothes, I will be healed."
Immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once, Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked,
"Who touched my clothes?" "You see the people crowding against you,"
his disciples answered.
"and yet you can ask, 'Who touched me?'"
But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. He said to her,
"Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering."
While Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader.
"Your daughter is dead.
They said.
Why bother the teacher anymore?"
Overhearing what they said, Jesus told him,
"Don't be afraid. Just believe."
He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion, with people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them,
"Why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep."
But they laughed at him. After he put them all out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him, and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her,
"Talitha cum,"
which means,
"Little girl, I say to you, get up."
Immediately the girl stood up and began to walk around. She was 12 years old. At this, they were completely astonished. He gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this, and told them to give her something to eat.
I'm going to skip some stuff for this, Here's the question I want you to wrestle with today. And the question is, why does God heal some people and not others? Why does God heal some people but not other people? And you can get stuck in a frustration of like, you're just stuck and you're just like, does God not love? Does God not care? Does God not do this or that or whatever you're thinking? Like, did God not care about me? Why does God heal some people and not others? In verse 21 of Mark chapter 5, it says, Jesus crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake. So basically, since this series has started, we were on the western side of the sea. We were on the west side, and then we went to the eastern shore last week, and now we go back over the sea to the northwest side to a village called Capernaum, which is about a 6 to 8 mile journey by boat. So this guy comes up to Jesus, Jairus. He came over to Jesus and he falls at his feet. Verse 23, it says, he pleaded earnestly with him. "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live. So Jesus went with him. Jairus' backstory, he was likely either a Pharisee or a Sadducee, but most likely he was a Sadducee. And the Sadducees, these people, Jairus was probably a Sadducee because of the duties talked about in other parts of Scripture. And something to know about these Sadducees and other religious people is that the Jewish people didn't believe the Messiah was on earth yet. The Pharisees were more wealthy people. They believed in the afterlife, but Sadducees were the workers of the temple. They planned temple teachings, who was teaching, what they were teaching on. But the Sadducees didn't believe in the afterlife. So when Jairus says that his daughter is dying, he believes there is nothing after this life. Nothing can be done. But when you believe in some form of afterlife, death can be more of a celebration. He is grasping at straws because his daughter is dying. He believed that the Messiah hadn't come yet. Jewish people to this day believe the Messiah hasn't come yet. So they don't really believe in a resurrection or afterlife because the Messiah hasn't come yet. And so we read this story, we hear of this story, and we have a pause in the story. We're getting to the good part and we're getting ready to go heal somebody, and then something else happens. We'll come back to this story later. It's like a side quest, like you're in Super Mario, you're like, I'm on my way to save Princess Peach, but you have to go through some side quests, like getting rid of the Bob-ombs or the Koopa Troopas to get to Bowser to save Princess Peach. It's all about the journey. To get to Jairus' daughter, Jesus had to get through the crowd. People had been hearing of Jesus' miracles from around the sea and wanted to check out what was going on. And as Dot told me my first Sunday at Trinity, she said all the squirrels wanted to come and see the nut. So now we're at a story within the story. People are gathering around. There's a big crowd. People want to see what's going on. And basically we're a story within a story, which can be called a nested narrative or embedded narrative. I mean, who really thought you were going to learn English on a Sunday? But this is your English lesson for today. A story within a story is a nested narrative or embedded narrative. So the next time you're on Cash Cab or Jeopardy, you can know that answer and get that right. So it says, a large crowd followed and pressed around him. Now this word press, its meaning in the Greek form, the word is synthlibo. And it's not saying just a lot of people, like there's a lot of people, but it means compressed on all sides. I remember Jen and I went to a concert in Detroit. It was, we went to go see a band called Under Oath. And there's just so many people there. And we're at this show. It's a farewell tour for this band. And we're excited. Everybody's excited. So when people start moshing, start pushing, there was just waves of pressing around, and I just felt like compressed, and I just felt like there's parts like I couldn't breathe. It was just like I was barely on my feet, and I was just kind of moving around just like wherever the waves of people wanted to go. And I didn't realize the danger that I was in and the danger that Jen was in with me. Because about a year ago, there was a Travis Scott concert in November 2021. And there's 9 people that died from being compressed because the crowd rushed the stage. People were being thrown around and kind of moved kind of in that same manner. I didn't realize how dangerous that actually was until I heard of this story. So that's the word press that we're talking about. Not just a crowd, but it's hard to breathe. You can't get through, like it's so crowded. Verse 25, it says, a woman bleeding for 12 years, she suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and all she had spent. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. So when she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd. You think the doctors are going to be the people that are going to heal you. and that at least you're going to get better over time. And you're sitting there, you're just like, I'm not getting better. Nothing's happening. 12 years she had spent everything she had for a cure, and this was her one last chance. So she came up behind Jesus in the crowd, not nonchalantly. It was hard to do anything nonchalantly there, but she pushed her way through, risking being crushed, like that sunthlibo that we're talking about, crushed, pressed, compressed from all around. It's just difficult to move around. So getting through there, risking being killed, and she touched his cloak. Because she had heard about the power of Jesus as well, just as Jairus had heard of the power of Jesus and heard of the miracles and the teachings that were going on all around the sea. In verse 28, she says, because she thought, if I just touch his cloak. Some translations say clothes, hem, or hem of robe, that I will be healed. If I just touch a little part of Jesus, I will be healed. It says the bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. She had been bleeding for 12 years. Verse 30, at once Jesus realized that the power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, who touched my clothes? You see the people crowding, again, the same word crowding, sunthlibo, he's using this again, like he's understanding the pressing and the compressing that's happening. And he says, who touched my clothes? And the disciples are like, who touched me? Like, everybody's touching you. We're all touching because we're stuck here. We're in this crowd. But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Now, isn't Jesus all-knowing? So why was he looking if he was all-knowing? Jesus knew what happened. And he wanted a confession of faith from whoever touched him. Of course, Jesus knew who touched him, but he wanted the woman to publicly proclaim her faith. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, she told him the whole truth. She was afraid, but just as she had been healed. Again, people are afraid when Jesus heals them. People are afraid when miracles happen. The disciples were afraid when Jesus calmed the storm, and this woman was afraid after her healing. But this fear was different. It wasn't fear that Jesus had done the miracle. It was fear because she was unclean. This woman, for at least 12 years, had been disqualified from marriage. She was unclean. She couldn't be around anyone. She wasn't allowed to go and worship God. She wasn't allowed to go into the temple. She wasn't allowed to basically just go to church and be with people. She could not live a normal life. Basically, she was a dead person walking. She had been living as though she was dead for 12 years because she couldn't be around people. She couldn't do things that people should be allowed to do. And so by touching someone while being unclean, she would have made Jesus unclean. And other scholars believe that she even stole a gift of healing from Jesus. That's how she felt. That she was afraid because she might have stolen something from someone. Because women don't approach men in that day and age. Women didn't touch men. So she was afraid because she would have made Jesus unclean. She's afraid because she touched a man, because she bothered a man. She couldn't throw herself in front of Jesus because she would have been told to go back home. So she tried to go unnoticed because of her uncleanliness. And she was afraid of public humiliation. She was afraid of the scorn and what people think about her. That's the fear that's in her. It says, but in verse 34, it says, but Jesus said to her, daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and you will be freed from your suffering. He's saying you don't have to fear anymore. You are not unclean. You're clean now. You can go back into society. You can go get married. You can do all the things that normal people can do. Go in peace and you don't have to live in fear anymore. So this is the end of the middle story, the narrative that's within this embedded narrative. So we go back to the original story. We're back to Jairus and his daughter. His daughter's dying. In verse 35, it says, while Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. They said, your daughter is dead. Why bother the teacher anymore? Remember, they didn't believe in an afterlife, so there's no hope. Hope is gone. She's dead. All hope is gone. Saying like, Jesus, you're too late. Like, why did you help the bleeding woman? Why did you stop when this other person is dying? But Jesus was in no hurry because he knew the next part. Verse 36, overhearing, in some translations say ignoring what they said, ignoring that, people saying that your daughter is dead, ignoring that, Jesus told Jairus, don't be afraid, just believe. Don't be afraid, just believe. Don't give up hope. Hope is here. Hope is the belief that something can change. Just because what you see isn't the expected outcome doesn't mean that it can't change. Just because what you see doesn't mean that Jesus can't change it. Verse 37, it says, he did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. These are the people that Jesus poured into the most. Peter, James, and John. The other disciples couldn't come in. When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. He's saying, don't give up hope, Jairus. Keep your eyes on me. And people are crying. All hope looks lost, but focus on me because things can change when I step into a room. Verse 39, he went and said to them, why all this commotion and wailing? The child's not dead, but asleep. But they laughed at him. Great joke, Jesus. Wrong time. Can't you see everybody's crying? Can't you see everybody's wailing? Child's not dead, is asleep. Oh, that's hilarious. Great one. She's obviously dead. That's what people are saying. And after he put them all out, he made all the people leave that were in there. He took the child's father and mother and the 3 disciples who were with him and went in where the child was. He's basically telling these people, because you don't believe something can change, you don't get to be here for the miracle. Because you don't believe enough, you don't get to see it happen. This is for the people who have faith. So go out of the house, hang out there, do whatever you're going to do out there. I don't need negativity for Jairus. I need him to focus on me. And sometimes, even as Christians, we have to block out other Christians who don't have faith for the miracle that God is telling you is going to happen. And this is what God promised me. If you don't believe it, you can't be a part of the rejoicing when it happens. You can't be a bandwagon fan and jump on when things look good. You got to go through some bad seasons and learn to love in the losses before you can share in the wins. I've been through many, many bad years of the Colts being bad before they actually won a Super Bowl. I remember some 3-13 years. I remember some times when they were supposed to make the playoffs last year and they didn't. But if you don't love them in the losses, you can't share in the rejoicing. You can't share in the celebration because you're a bandwagon fan. And the same is what Jesus is telling these other people, like, no, you can't be here. You just want to be here when everything's great. He took her, the daughter, by the hand and said to her, Talitha cum, which means, little girl, I say to you, get up. Immediately the girl stood up, began to walk around. She was 12 years old. And at this time, they were completely astonished. He gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this and told them to give her something to eat. So what we see here, we see two different stories happening. There's the embedded narrative or a nest narrative. And what we need to do right now is we need to compare and contrast both stories because there's some things on each side that we need to understand. So first, we're going to contrast the two stories. Someone went on behalf of the little girl. The father, Jairus, went on behalf of the little girl. But the woman went to Jesus on her own. One was an outcast. One was pushed away from society. For 12 years, she was outcasted. She couldn't do anything that normal people did. And the other one was a very respected religious leader in the society. And not just in Jewish culture, but even in Roman culture as well. The Sadducees were close and higher up with the Roman people as well, too, because they kept the peace. There was one that was healed in the crowd. There was one healing that was in isolation. The bleeding woman is called daughter. And she hadn't been able to be a part of society, let alone be with family. She's alone. She had been alone for 12 years. And he says, daughter, you're now part of the family. I mean, yeah, you can go be part of your physical family, but now you get spiritual family. And you think of that versus Jesus addresses the girl as little girl. And this wasn't really an element of faith for the girl. It was really focused on Jairus and his faith. It was really focused on him. It had not a lot to do with the girl. Yes, she's alive. Yes, she's walking. But it was more on Jairus and his faith. One was able to go out and tell people, go to the temple. Likely, this is what we would assume. She was already in a crowd. People are going to know. The other was told not to go tell anyone. It wasn't time for other people to know what had happened. Because there's Jesus many times where he couldn't get away from people. And to keep his ministry going, he needed times of solitude with the Father. He needed to get out of there unnoticed. Don't tell anybody what happened. Just give her something to eat. She'll be back in society in no time. So those are the contrasts of what's going on. When we compare these stories, both the girl and the woman are healed. Another thing is that there was 12 years of bleeding and this girl is 12 years old. It's not anything like that 12 means something. It's just an interesting fact that they're both here together. Just a coincidence. Not saying like you got to wait 12 years, you'll finally be healed. It has nothing to do with that. One is a bridge of faith, or they're both actually bridging their faith from Jewish law to realizing that Jesus is the Messiah. Unclean came from the old covenant. It was a good thing. It was safety. It prevents spread of disease. It set apart God's people from others. Being unclean was to help keep God's people safe. And the woman had to break barriers. She had to go out in public. She had to push through the crowd. She had to risk public humiliation, possibly being killed and pressed and compressed in this crowd to touch a man, a religious leader, someone who is way above her as an outcast. It was an element of faith from Judaism to a follower of Christ. Jairus was a high up religious leader, high up in the community. He had a choice to make. To stay within the confines of what he knew, or step out of what he knew and into what he heard about Jesus. He was giving up a lot for his daughter. He gave up a lot just to go and have Jesus come to him. It was an element of faith from being someone who just did work in the temple to being a follower of Christ and accepting Jesus as the Messiah. He could have lost everything, and he probably did lose a lot. So we come back to the question I asked at the beginning. And I'm guessing that this question has challenged many people with their faith. Why does God heal some people and not others? Someone from our last church that we ministered at, and Jen and I were pastors, had been dealing with aggressive cancer. She was about 40, 45 years old, and she passed away earlier this week. People die every day at ages that are astounding. They're just like, they should have had more time. Did God not care? Did these people not have enough faith for healing? My roommate in college, his dad died of brain cancer. He had faith. I had faith that he could be healed. Hundreds of people had faith. Why weren't these people healed? Why did they die? And this question of why does God heal some people and not others can cause a crisis of faith. Jesus, you said if I have enough faith, as small as a mustard seed, I can move mountains. Jesus, you said if I have 2 or 3 people gather in your name, you will be there as well. You said if we offered a prayer in faith, you will make a sick person well. What happened, Jesus? And the fact is, every person's not healed. And Jesus didn't heal every person he came into contact with. And that's a hard thing to understand. Not every person will be healed on this earth. Healing does happen. And I believe in the power of healing. But I see a lot of people stuck with their illnesses in the Bible. A lot of people stuck with the hand that has been dealt in their life. Did God cause someone to die because he needed them in heaven? Obviously not. Did God cause someone to not be healed because of their faith? Jesus didn't heal every person he came into contact with. Paul, the Apostle Paul, who wrote a lot of the New Testament, Paul was stuck with a thorn in his flesh. Whether that was spiritual, whether that was physical, he was stuck with a thorn in his flesh. Paul tells Timothy to drink wine for his stomach ailments because his stomach issues didn't go away. He didn't get healed. He told him to drink some wine for his stomach. Paul left someone unhealed in Miletus. Jesus couldn't do miracles in his own town because of their unbelief. Only some people were healed. Some people were prayed for in his hometown. Jesus could have healed himself on the cross and could have not had any pain. Jesus didn't heal every person. It's not that he's not able. Now here's 3 reasons people aren't healed. 3 reasons people aren't healed. The first one is we didn't have faith. We didn't have enough faith. I don't think it's even going to happen. What's the point of believing? I have no hope. I have no faith. What's the point? The second one is we never asked Jesus. We've been struggling and we've never ever asked Jesus, I need you to heal my mom, my dad, my daughter, my son, my friend. We never asked. We never went and approached Jesus. The woman who was bleeding approached Jesus in a dangerous place. Jairus could have lost everything and probably lost a lot because he went to Jesus. We didn't ask. Sometimes because we're afraid, sometimes because we don't have the faith. And the most difficult one, and that we're going to take more time on, is this. It's we signed up for it. First one, that people aren't healed. We didn't have faith. Second one, we didn't ask. The third one, we signed up for it. It's not because their faith. It's not because they didn't ask. But it's a possibility knowing that healing may never take place because of the sacrifice. It might not come here on earth, but if we are following Christ, the win takes place in heaven, where it says there's no more crying, there's no more pain, there's no more suffering. There's healing in heaven, and that might be the only healing that we get. Not because God doesn't love you or because he loves to see his people hurt. It's a part of our human nature because there's sin in the world. We live with suffering because of sin. And that was never part of the plan. Suffering was never intended, but it's a reality because of sin. If there wasn't suffering, there would be no need for Jesus. We just say, we can do it on our own. And it's only through Jesus that we can have the possibility of healing, to have that opportunity to approach God and say, I need you to heal me, or have enough faith in saying, I need you to heal me. It's only through Jesus that we have the possibility of healing here on earth. And here's the good part, is that Jesus participated in the suffering so we could persevere through pain, so that we could go through trials. Jesus didn't come down from the cross when he's bleeding to death, when he is having bones broken and people are stabbing him and he has the crown of thorns. Jesus never came down. He persevered through the pain and trial so that we could persevere through pain and trial. And after Jesus died, he went to the place of the dead to defeat sin and death once and for all. He didn't just have it easy, like, oh, I'm just going to get a nice couple days away from earth. I'm just going to sit in hell. It's a little hot, but I'll turn the AC on. But Jesus went down there to defeat sin and death. And when we pray in the Lord's prayers, we say, your will be done. It's two different things. It's an anthem saying, God, whatever you need me to do, I'm going to do it. It's an anthem saying, this is my battle cry. Your will be done. And the second part is, it's a sacrifice. When you say your will be done, sometimes we have to sacrifice things that we don't want to go through. And we have to go through those things. Saying your will be done is an anthem of saying, God, I'm going to keep going. And a sacrifice, even when I don't get what I think I deserve, that I'm going to keep going. It's sticking through the bad times, even if the good never comes here on earth. It's a declaration to keep moving when you don't feel like that you're winning. When you're the Detroit Lions or you're the New York Jets. Even if you don't get healed or see someone healed that you love, it produces perseverance. Paul talks about this in Romans chapter 5, verse 3. It says, not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance, character, and character, hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. Now you've probably heard that before. I'm going to read it in the Message paraphrase, to just kind of boggle your mind and change things up a little bit. It's the same truth, but it's just written a little different. The Message paraphrase says, there's more to come. We continue to shout our praise even when we're hemmed in with troubles, because we know how our troubles can develop passionate patience in us, and how that patience in turn forges the tempered steel of virtue, keeping us alert for whatever God will do next. An alert expectancy such as this, we're never left feeling shortchanged. Quite the contrary. We can't round up enough containers to hold everything God generously pours into our lives through the Holy Spirit. And today, when we have the question of why does God heal some people and not others, I don't want it to be a crisis of faith, but I want it to be an anthem and a sacrifice, a battle cry of saying, even when I don't understand, even when I don't get what I want, even when things look difficult, things look dim, and I've been stuck on the outskirts and been an outcast for years and years and years, even if it never comes on earth, we get the share and the win of heaven. Healing will happen. Jesus does promise that. Healing will happen whether it's here on earth or in heaven.